everybody, hope you're good today. So today we are going to be continuing with um this project, and today we are going to be focusing on this part of the solution. So yes, I think the last time we talked about what makes up a system design, and one of them is how systems communicate, which is mostly about APIs. So how two systems can communicate, clients, server communication, two applications, and all of that. So today we are going to be seeing how we can, as PMs, influence API designs, work with developers to determine how to use APIs to solve problems that the users are facing. So typically when your users are facing problems, you should be able to know what is going on. Even though you're not going to be the one to directly solve the problem, you should be able to know, have a glimpse of what is going on and where the problem is coming from. Right. So we are going to look at the stage 2 task. So we are going to be looking at the problems first, which is one, progress isn't accurately saved. User learners cannot see how much course that they've completed. Right. Certificates remain locked even after finishing all the lessons. So your task is to design 5 endpoints. So if you know what API is, you should know what endpoints are. So the first one is the endpoints that enables us to get course progress, and then to enroll in a course, to unlock, or get certificates, to mark lesson as completed, and then to get certificate status. Now, ensure to show happy parts and unhappy parts in some of the steps. Now, what are happy parts? Happy parts are like the path that a user takes without encountering any issue or any problem. So let's say I'm looking for a resource and I go and look for it. It shows me that resource without any issue, right? But there are some things you might want to do, right? You might encounter some unhappy parts. For example, if you're looking for an image that does not exist in the image endpoint, it will tell you that 404, this image is not found. So that's like an unhappy part for a typical user, right? So you will also be telling us what is the step by step the user will take to until they unlock the certificate, right? So if the steps above are not, if you feel like they are not arranged, rearrange them. But if you feel like they are arranged, leave it like that. So typically, what do you think should be the first thing? Do you think getting course certificate should be the first thing? I mean, getting course progress should be the first thing, or enrolling in a course? Like, what do you think should be the first thing, step by step procedure that the user should take before they can unlock their certificate? Now, after that, explain clearly how the APIs. Oh, this is supposed to be endpoint. How the endpoints are above. I'm going to correct this after I finish making this video. Explain clearly how the endpoints above solve the user problem. Example, successfully getting certificate status. So for example, this can be, you can discuss this further by saying that it ensures certificate unlock only when eligible, because if you're not getting the status, right, then if one of the status could be that, okay, this lesson is completed. So let's say all the requirements is that the user must complete all the lessons. So it means that if the user does not complete all the lessons, the system cannot mark it as complete, and if it does not mark it as complete, then the user cannot get their certificate, right? So that is like an example of the explanation I want you to give. So request and response, with necessary information where necessary, such as method. So what I want here is, I need you to make sure that you have your API design has the request and response with necessary information when necessary, such as method, status code, body, etc. Right. Also, write short notes on how each of them solves the problem. Okay, I made a couple of typos, but yeah, I'm gonna still correct them. So number 2, so this is the number 1. The one I just explained above is number one. Number two is design at least two screens showing learner interaction with the endpoints. Example, course progress screen. Tell us what it looks like. I'm going to show you an example. I'm going to run through this problem. I'm going to show you an example of how to, do this, right? But I'm not going to do the practical for you because I believe you should know how to sketch out solutions by now. Is either you're sketching on paper or you're using Lovable or you're using Figma Make, right? So course progress screen shows completed lessons, ongoing, pending, and all of that. So certificate screen shows unlocked certificate and download. So these are like examples. So for the deliverables, I will just need an API design document, right? I'll show you what it looks like, and then the UI/client facing screens. Now, if you don't have an API, is just there if it is not being used, right? So what is going to be making sure that the API is consumed or utilized is the client facing side, the order of the application that is going to be communicating with the API. That is actually what makes API useful. So if the API is just lying there, then it's just there, right? So yeah, so that's that for this task. So let's go directly to my slides. So, like I said, system communication, APIs contract design. So, in case you don't know how APIs work, this is how it works. So, there's usually like an API consumer, which is known as the client, right? Or the front end. And then we have the API provider, which is usually like the back end. For example, this Google Maps is utilized by Uber, right? So Uber does not have their own mapping system. You know that map that shows the driver the route to take and all of that. They actually make use of Google Maps API, even though they are not the one that developed it. So the Google app platform has the back end, while Uber is consuming it and is using it to solve their problem, their location problem, right? So usually there is a response and a request communication going on. So when the client makes the request, right, then the provider provides it, which is the back end where the API is provides it, right? And typically an API will have an endpoint where that particular data is being stored, right? It's also known as the server location URL, right? And then it can also have the method. So method can be of post, get, put, delete, patch. We have some of them. So you can always make your research, right? I just want you to understand how APIs solve this particular problem. And then we have the header, the payload. The payload is like the data that is contained in the body, the actual thing that is being sent or received, right? Now the response always comes back with a status, right? Either it is successful or not, and it comes with a code. So usually if it's in the 200s, it means it is successful. If it's in the 400s, you know that there's an error, like, typically like a user error. In the 500s, like a server error. So you need to understand these things, right? So let's go. We are going to be using LinkedIn as an example for this particular explanation I want to give. So for example, if you want to create your user profile on LinkedIn, there's something that you would normally do. So this was what I was trying to tell you when I say do the client side. So this is the client side. This is the face. This is the part of the platform that you're going to be seeing, right? When you want to create your LinkedIn account on LinkedIn, right? I got this image from Google. So this is normally what you will see when you want to create an account, but this is what is actually going on, right, in the communication on the server, right? You have requested, and typically let's say the endpoint here is app.linkedin.com/create user. Now this doesn't is I'm not sure if it is like this. If you check LinkedIn's API documentation, it would likely not be like this. So it's left for LinkedIn to decide on the URL they want to use, right? And where they want to store, how they want to store their data, right? Now the payload, like I said, is the actual information that is being sent. So in this case, I want to open an account, so I would usually like fill my name and my email address, right? And because I'm sending it to the back end, I'm gonna be using the method post. Now this is what is responsible for this, right? Now if the status is 200, it means it is successful and it has been sent. Now the body in this case is the user ID, right? So the system will generate a user ID, right? So that is for this particular screen. So you see what is going on here and what is going on here on the client side. So this is the client side and this is the server side. So another example is when you want to edit your profile or edit your profile information on LinkedIn, right? So because you want to edit, right, this is what will likely be going on app.linkedin.com/edit underscore user. Now this can be any, depending on how the developer designs it and depending on what the URL is, right? For example, google.com would mostly likely use app.google.com or api.google.com slash whatever resource they want to store. So it depends on their team to decide the resource that they want, the URL or the endpoint. So another name for this is the endpoint or the URL, right? So the header in this case is the authentication code, and then the payload, right? Again, what is being sent or received is, because I'm editing, so I've already added what I want to add to it, which is like my last name, right? So here notice that it didn't have, I only had two names. Here I updated it to three. All right, and the method I'm using is put. So when I want to edit an information or a resource, I use the put method, right? And because it was successful, the status is 200. So we are going to be making use of this resource, right, to test our API. I have already kept this URL on the resources tab on your challenge room, so you can get it there. So let's go to this URL. So when you go here, this is a free resource that allows you to make use of free APIs, right? Now because we don't have an actual data, we don't have an actual API for this particular problem we want to solve. Now normally when you're working an application, in a real application, your developers will come up with the APIs. So one of your jobs as the PM, right, because you're going to be involved heavily with testing, so you don't want to be that PM that is just there, he or she doesn't know what to do, right? Even when the developer has finished working on the API, you don't even know how to test to see if it is working, right? So let's say the developer has developed an API that fetches all the certificates for a particular user, right? You wouldn't know how to test it and see if it is working if you don't understand APIs. And that's the purpose of this particular task. You're going to be understanding how APIs affect user problems and how you can use it to solve user problems. So for this illustration, I'm going to be downloading Postman. So I already have Postman on my laptop, so you can go and download Postman. Just go to postman.com and go to downloads. You can download. If you use a MacBook, you can download for MacBook. If you use a Windows, you can download for Windows, right? So I'm just going to make use of get in this example. So I'm just going to open the API, the Postman, right? So now when you open it, right, what you're just going to do is to create new HTTP. Remember, we are making use of HTTP and the different methods. I'm just going to show you how to use it with just one example, then you can continue exploring after now. So let's say I want to get all the users in that resource that we just saw on that URL, right? What I will just do is I'll paste what I want here, right, and I'll send. Okay, so notice that it just showed me one of the users because I had already added just one. So if I add two here, it will show me two, which is the second person. So I can as well fetch all of them, and it shows me all the users in this resource, right? Make sure that when you do this, you select the right method. In this case, I'm using get. So let's say your developer has developed this, has come up with this API endpoint, which is for users to get all the users in your platform. How do you know if it is working? Right, so when you paste it here and use the get method and send, right, make sure that you're using the JSON, right? And once you send, you notice that this place is 200. Request successful, the server has responded as required. So even before why do you need to test your API before you even start using it? Because if you don't test it, you're going to be wasting a lot of time. You're going to be increasing your cycle time. So your cycle time is the amount of time it takes for your team to finish a feature from, to do to done or in production, right? So because you're not testing as you go, remember agile, requires you test as you go. So you're waiting till, the front end developer consumes it. You now realize that, oh, this is not even working. So, but when you test it immediately, the backend developer is done. If there's any error, you're going to see it here. For example, if I search for a user that is, let's say, 1,000, right? In the position of 1,000. I'm not sure if we have such information here, but let me see what you're gonna tell me. So you notice that because we don't have 1,000 here as a user, probably it stopped in like 40 or thereabout. So you see that it is showing me 404 not found. So you don't even need to wait for your front-end developer. You don't need any interface to even test this. So your developer just gives you the URL and you use your postman to test. As simple as that, right? And here, like, this is not a happy part. So you already know that this is not a happy part for a typical user, because no user wants to look for something and not see it, right? So when a user is looking for the user that has a position of 1,000, it means that's like an unhappy part for that user. And you see that it means that this particular one, there's nothing like that, right? So this is an example on how to test the your endpoint, right? So typically, let's go back to here. So you can always use this. Now, why I can't use the task that I gave you to test is because we don't have a real or actual endpoint for that particular tasks, right? Or for that particular application. So normally you will need your developer to come up with the endpoint and then you test. But you will be the one to design how the API is going to be. And this is what the design looks like for this one, right? So, and this is what the client or the UI side of it looks like. So I expect you to do this for the client side and then do this. So this is basically the design. Now, but when you look at this task properly, you're going to when you solve this problem, right, you're going to now let us know, how your APIs affect this problem and how it solves it, right? For example, was API endpoint to enroll in a course, right, in Learnify. So if you're able to come up with that and do the front end and the client side and then do the API design, right, then of course, I don't want to tell you what the solution is, but I believe with what I have shown you, you should be able to understand, what how you're going to tackle the problem, right? So I believe this is going to put in a research mode. Do all the research you can. It's gonna be fun, and you're going to be learning a lot from this particular, task. So good luck to everybody. I hope to get your results or your task submissions pretty soon, right? So see ya.